Guys, with the playoffs, semifinal games now over, the record ratings, everything that went into them, we do have a very interesting question that's been percolating all over social media. Who had the worst loss, Ohio State or Michigan? It's kind of funny because they are arch rivals. Now, guys, personally, I do want to say I was hoping and praying, and I think it would have been so unbelievably great for college football, and the ratings would be so historic if we got an Ohio State-Michigan national championship rematch. You take a look at the ratings that broke multiple records in both the Michigan-TCU game and the Ohio State-Georgia game. Michigan and Ohio State, basically the two biggest draws in college football. I think that TCU-Georgia game is going to do horrible in terms of ratings. You take a look at the ticket prices. They can't give the tickets away. No one wants to see that game. But no, we do give credit to Michigan and TCU. But guys, when it comes to the question, whose loss was worse, I think it's slightly, very slightly Ohio State. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the Ohio State-Georgia loss, how Ohio State lost. Coming into this season, they always talk about Ohio State having a few main goals. Beating Michigan, didn't do it. Winning the Big Ten, didn't even make the Big Ten championship. Winning the national title, guys, that was right there for Ohio State. There's also the question, which is a worse loss for Ohio State? This year versus Georgia or 2019 versus Clemson? Now, I agree the 2019 loss versus Clemson was way more egregious in terms of the officiating. This game versus Georgia, Ohio State had several defensive lapses. Georgia had more total yards. The only real officiating issue, or the main one, was the Marvin Harrison Jr. play. So in terms of officiating, the Clemson game was worse. But guys, I would argue this is more demoralizing because Ohio State in 2019, even if they win that game against Clemson like pretty much everyone thought they were going to, they completely outplayed Clemson. It was a joke. The Shaun Wade ejection when they were up 16-0 and getting the ball back. Even if they win that game, you have to face Joe Burrow, you have to face Jamar Chase, you have to face Justin Jefferson, and you've got an injured J.K. Dobbins. Good luck. So guys, this game, if Ohio State beats Georgia, you're a 10-point favorite. Even with Marvin Harrison Jr. not going to play in it, you're still, if you beat Georgia, you're smelling a national title. And I have nothing but respect for TCU. I keep saying it, and people keep saying, oh, you don't like TCU. No, I respect TCU. I said TCU was going to cover against Michigan plus the 7.5. I didn't think they'd win. But Ohio State, it's so demoralizing. And then looking at Michigan and their loss to TCU, I mean, my goodness, did they just give that game away in the first half? Everyone was asking me when I went live on Saturday night and I had an epic meltdown late in the Ohio State-Georgia game, everyone was asking me, how does Michigan lose to TCU? And I would tell people, listen, there were 3 plays in the first half for Michigan. The opening drive, you drive the length of the field. You have to get points. You have to. 4th and goal at the 2-yard line. You're more physical than them. You have a better offensive line. You've got to get a touchdown. They come up with nothing. They get the ball 1st and goal at the 1. After the review ruled Roman Wilson down at the 1-yard line, even if you thought it should have been a touchdown, 1st and goal at the 1-yard line. Michigan fumbles. TCU recovers in the end zone, so it's a touchback. So Michigan doesn't even get the advantage of TCU having to start at their own 1-yard line. That is one of the worst plays in college football, where you have 1st and goal at the 1-yard line. You fumble, it goes into the end zone, so TCU gets to start. They get the ball, you get no points. On 1st and goal, you get no points, and TCU gets to start at their own 20. That is one of the worst momentum, just overall game-changing plays in college football. And then the early J.J. McCarthy pick six. And now pick sixes are just crippling. They're crippling. I'm sure we all know that, but my God, especially early in the game. And Michigan from that point on is completely playing from behind. If Michigan and TCU faced off 10 times, I think Michigan wins 7 times. If Ohio State and Georgia faced off 10 times, I think it's 5-5, honestly, unless Ohio State somehow gets JSN back. But in terms of that game, obviously Ohio State, they were still up 38-24. You've got to close that out. Oh, you've got to close that out. It's right there. You can smell the national title against TCU. You're 10-point favorites against them. You've still got other receiving weapons. These are two demoralizing losses. And guys, could you imagine right now the epicness we would all be feeling? And I know some people don't like the Big Ten and stuff like that, but come on, guys. Michigan versus Ohio State for the national title in a potential revenge game for Ohio State. And it would be very funny because Ohio State would be the favorites. Even though they lost to Michigan, they would be the favorites in this game, probably by 3 points. It would be the biggest ratings in college football history. Instead, they can't even give away tickets in this TCU-Georgia game. I'm glad they moved the time. They at least moved the time back to 7:30, so it's not that late, and it should help the ratings a little bit. But guys, it would have been, because I know Ohio State was rooting against Michigan. Michigan fans were rooting against Ohio State. I was rooting for an Ohio State-Michigan game because that would have been so epic, and it would have been so great for college football, and we would have seen it would outrate basically all the NFL playoff games outside of the Super Bowl. So when it comes to who had the more demoralizing defeat based off of the seasons, if you're a Michigan fan, you beat Ohio State on the road when you were 10-point underdogs. You won the Big Ten, but it is demoralizing. You look at Jim Harbaugh's bowl record. You look at last year. You make the playoffs. It's all fun. It's fine. You get crushed by Georgia, whatever. They won the national title. This year, you have a distinct talent advantage over TCU. You're 7.5-point favorites. At one point, Michigan was 9.5-point favorites. You've got to win the game. You have got to win the game. And they threw that game away in the first half. They were able to try and come back a little bit. Ronnie Bell, some big plays, some big passes. But Michigan was always uncomfortable in that game. Once it got to the end of the first quarter, after the pick six, Michigan played completely. It just felt like Michigan was uncomfortable playing from behind. So guys, I think Michigan certainly more happy with their season than Ohio State. Ohio State, it was this is kind of it. You've lost to Michigan. You didn't win the Big Ten again. You've got to go out there and do something against Georgia. And they actually did. Ohio State was up 38-24. And I said, listen, take Ohio State money line. Take Ohio State plus the 6.5. It's a lock. Take the over. And it was looking so good. And guys, I think Jim Knowles, and certainly you can't fire Jim Knowles or anything like that, but my goodness, the defensive lapses Ohio State has, there's just way too many big plays for Georgia. And guys, what is with Jim Knowles' philosophy where he says only allow 5 explosive plays? 5 explosive plays in one game is way too many. Maybe at the most 3 explosive. I don't understand that strategy. 5 explosive plays could be 4 touchdowns and a play into the red zone. How is 5 explosive plays a game acceptable? I believe Michigan had 5 explosive plays against Ohio State and they got destroyed by Michigan. So I just don't understand the philosophy of allowing 5 explosive plays and will be good. No, limit the explosive plays as much as possible. These are 17, 18-year-old kids. Make them have 10 to 12 play drives. Make them convert multiple third downs. This whole idea where you can allow 5 explosive plays in a game is ridiculous. And I know it's Jim Knowles' scheme. He wants to be aggressive. If he wants to be aggressive, why is he playing his defensive backs 10 yards off the ball in a condensed field on a 2nd and 17 when Georgia was practically in the red zone and he has his defensive backs 10 yards off the ball and Georgia throws a screen pass? On 2nd and 17, Georgia throws a screen pass and scores a touchdown on a screen pass near the red zone at Ohio State's 25. It makes no sense. I don't want to kill Jim Knowles. He's got to get better for sure. But I think that Ohio State game, C.J. Stroud played well enough. The run call by Ryan Day late, if you guys remember that play, it's just You're at the... I'm not going to go over it, guys. That's not this video. That's not what I want to do. But I will say, in terms of who had the more demoralizing loss, based off of how the seasons went, it's Ohio State, but Michigan as well. I mean, the problem is, that's like you're already 0-1 in the playoffs. You're 7.5-point favorites against the team you're more talented than. You have to win the game. And you threw the first half away. And now you're playing in a trail position, which Michigan hates doing. And certainly all the credit to Georgia and TCU. That's fine, whatever. I just wanted to talk about Michigan and Ohio State and their current situations because both of the losses are demoralizing. Ohio State, you know, a lot of people, really no one picked them. But the reason their loss is so demoralizing is because they were up by 2 touchdowns late in that game. And also, you're basically playing for broke. I mean, you didn't beat Michigan. You didn't win the Big Ten. At least if you did those two things and then lost to Georgia in a close game, that's an acceptable season. But now you're 0 for 3. You lose to Michigan. You don't even make the Big Ten championship, and you don't even make the national championship. So, you know, guys, both of these teams, it's tough. It certainly would have been something to see an Ohio State-Michigan national championship. It would have been epic to do a stream on it, guys. It would have been crazy. But instead, we get this. I don't want to badmouth them. It's a 13-point spread, Michigan or TCU, Georgia. I am very concerned that it will really struggle in terms of ratings. I guess we'll have to see. Again, they moved it to 7:30, so maybe it does a little bit better. But ESPN did come out with numbers, and they're bragging. They're saying, listen, both of these games, and they were both epic. They were both the highest rated semifinal games, I think, ever, or at least dating back to 2014. And that's New Year's Eve night. And it's so hard to get big ratings during New Year's Eve night. And then just to give everyone, I guess, a quick preview of the TCU-Georgia game. You know, I saw the over-under sitting around 63, and I know, obviously, based off of the 2 games we've had, it's been crazy scoring, but I actually like the value on the under. That's just my original thought. Obviously, Georgia is minus 13. A lot of people are going to like TCU because they're, you know, it's kind of like they're the underdog story, and people keep doubting them, and they keep proving them people wrong. So I can certainly understand TCU betting plus 13. I'm not going to advise to bet TCU plus 13, to bet Georgia minus 13. Guys, I don't know. I'm not in the right headspace to do that. The only thing, I just saw the line and I was like, listen, I do think there's decent value on the under 63.5 because TCU, they did run the ball really well against Michigan, but their passing game, that's where Georgia really struggles. And I feel like TCU is obviously not nearly as strong as Ohio State throwing the football with an attack. Quentin Johnson is certainly a beast, but I'm just saying in general, I think TCU is going to have a real problem trying to run the ball against the Georgia front. Ohio State, certainly Mayan Williams injured, Trevion injured. It was hard to run. But that Georgia front just completely stonewalls teams. So hopefully it's a close game. Hopefully it's a good matchup between TCU and Georgia. But it is certainly a little bit demoralizing that we did not get Ohio State versus Michigan. Either way, I'm going to say slightly it's a worse loss for Ohio State than it is for Michigan, but both, it is pretty bad. So guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.